Well, we have been talking about ancient Egyptian philosophy. Ancient Egyptian philosophy is ancient religions, different cults, worship, etc., etc. Has been somewhat concisely narrated in the former episodes. When we are talking about philosophy, we have to understand that there are so many schools of thoughts regarding to philosophies, and it depends several other sciences, natural sciences as well, philosophies. It has several traditions, materialistic traditions, idealistic, metaphysical traditions, religious, idealistic, metaphysical ideologies, materialistic traditions, etc., etc., which are so magnificent and expressively very important, particularly during the periods of Renaissance, emerged in Europe and elsewhere. And we have gathered up several philosophical schools of thoughts, including ancient philosophers, later on Middle Ages, Immanuel Kant, Francis Bacon, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Benedict Spinoza, Denis Diderot, etc., etc. So Machiavelli, several philosophers. Their contributions vary from their schools of thoughts, their diversities of thoughts, with their enormous progressive content and contribution to the human culture and its transition. And in the process of historical development, the correlation of objectives relating to the struggle against several withdrawing classes in each epoch of history. With regard to the antipodal class inside the antagonistic formation of societies, have geared up many revolutionizing efforts in every spheres of life, including philosophies, natural sciences, related other realms of wisdom, everywhere. Now we are giving importance to talk about the ancient Egyptian philosophy. Theology and cosmology were the rudimental or central concerns of ancient Egyptian philosophy. It was basically related to theology. It's considered that the early primordial form of a monotheistic theology was emerged in ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, it was very important that all religious cults were related with the monotheistic philosophy or monotheistic theology. It is referred to as Amarna theology or Atanism of Akhenaten, the pharaoh. The great pharaoh Akhenaten introduced his theory, Atanism or the Amarna theology, which gave primary importance to monotheistic theology. It was a kind of philosophical schools of thoughts. And during this period, all other insignificant polytheistic philosophies, worship, religious concepts have vanished. He gave primary importance to monotheistic theology, which also helped to develop later on so many Semitic religions in Mesopotamia. You can understand that the Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, Babylonians, etc., etc., have been greatly influenced by these monotheists. Later on, theological development largely influenced for the formation of new solar theology. New solar theology was very important in ancient Egypt, based around the Amun-Ra. Amun-Ra was the sun god who got national importance, acquired great national importance during the dynastic rule of Ahmose I, the pharaoh, in the 16th century BC. who withstood all the revolts and rebellions, particularly against the high causes. High causes were revolted against the forum. He withstood. He defended fiercely. Amun-Ra was worshipped as the king of gods and retained chief importance in the Egyptian pantheon throughout the New Kingdom. It was a period of New Kingdom era. However, Akhenaten gave great importance to Aten, the sun god. The Aten, the sun god, was later vanished and replaced by Amun-Ra. And these were also largely influenced all the philosophical schools of thought during this period, based on this concept of monotheism. Ancient Egyptian philosophy was referred to as wisdom literature as well, since the 24th BC. Since 24th BC, ancient Egyptian philosophy was referred to as wisdom literature. One of the notable Egyptian philosophers was Ptahhotep, who served as a vizier to the pharaoh at the time. His philosophical works was compiled as ethical behavior, or called as the maxims of Ptahhotep. It was greatly related with the religious rituals and ethical behavior of mankind. His grandson, Akhet-Hotep, contributed greatly after his death to his philosophy by evolving topics of ethical practices and human behavior in daily life. These were the philosophical schools at the time, during the 24th BC. But since ancient times, there was also several great books narrating about the philosophical schools of thoughts in ancient Egypt. One of the great books was The Immortality of Righteous, which was an old text of classical Egyptian philosophy. The Immortality of Righteous was an old text of classical Egyptian philosophy. This was really skeptical, rational, and revolutionary in content as a manuscript. This classical work was written by Irsesh, whose vision was centered on materialism, thinking and writing. And he did also denounce the fallacy of all the religious cult. He did almost denounce the importance of religions. In his great book, Immortality of Righteous, Irsesh wrote about several philosophical schools of thoughts. Some of his important thoughts were depicted in the following words. These are the lines he wrote. Man perishes, his corpse turns to dust, and all his relatives return to earth. But writing makes him remembered in the mouth of the reader. A book is more effective than a well-built house or a tomb chapel, better than the established villa or a stela in the temple of worship. Because he denounces temples of worship, he gives importance to writing, knowledge, wisdom. Irsesh was contemporary to Pharaoh Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti, who ruled Egypt during 1370 to 1330 BC. That is in the 14th century BC. And it was an era of the New Kingdom era. This era was significant with monotheistic worship of the sun god, Aten. Aten was the supreme god at the time, the sun god Aten. Later on, Amun-Ra replaced it. However, after this ruler's death, that means Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti's death, their successors returned to polytheism. Then they replaced monotheism with polytheism. These are the ancient historical developments in Egypt with their heritage, cultural heritage of all the preceding epochs, its developments, and its continuity. Basically, establishing the spiritual culture. And this spiritual culture was the base of the ancient philosophies as well. These are the ancient Egyptian philosophies, important ancient Egyptian philosophies. Now we can stop this matter and continue to give importance to Middle Eastern philosophy, which prevailed in the Semitic region. In the next episode, we can talk about the Semitic religious philosophies. Babylonia, Assyria, Akkadian, Sumeria, etc. etc. The geographical regions where these civilization flourished to establish their cultural heritage and their philosophies. We can narrate all those things in our next episode. Now let me stop this episode.